Hi, welcome to my podcast, which I've just named the 746.4X podcast. My name is Barbara. You can find me on Ravelry and Instagram and pretty much everywhere across social media as Library Maker. I am here today to do a second episode. I was not sure this was going to happen. I was really nervous putting the first one up, and then I did, which is great. And then it took me a little while to get enough steam and also to find a day where I could do a second one. I seem to be very busy all the time. So anyways, I'm back. I apologize that it's been exactly 28 days since I've done this. I know this because my work schedule is kind of funny and I can count days really easily because of it, at least on the weekends. So for the future of the podcast, the plan is, as long as I don't wimp out, chicken out again, is to post something every other week or record every other week. I have this funny schedule where I work 6 days in a row. That means the Sunday after I work 6 days in a row, I fall asleep and sleep all day. But then the next week I only work 4 days. So this past week was my 4-day week, and starting tomorrow I'll go into a 6-day week. But when I have the nice long weekend, it makes it a lot easier to get things done and also to find time to do things like record a podcast, which it seems is a little more difficult to do, and totally I'm so amazed by all the wonderful people who are able to podcast every week. You guys, and have tons of finished objects. Y'all are amazing and beautiful, wonderful makers, and I love it. It's absolutely fabulous. So I will try to be recording every time I have my long weekend. I can't promise things if my family has stuff going on. Last long weekend, which was 2 weeks ago, it was the big family birthday party, and I had to go around and see, I think, both grandmothers on Sunday. So that was a little bit of a long day in and of itself. So yeah, but anyways, so I have my show notes. That's what I'm looking at. I feel like a lot of other podcasters would know that because that's something we all have to do. We can't it's really hard just to go from memory. But anyways, so welcome to the 746.4X podcast. If you guys are wondering what the name means, it is actually the Dewey Decimal number for sort of the overarching needlework Dewey Decimal section, which is awesome, and I like that. And it's anytime I go to a new library, because I do when I go out of town and go on vacation, I find the library and check it out, mostly to look for what books do they have on display, what do their stacks look like, all that. But then I also head right to 746.4. 4-3 is knitting, no, that's right. Is that right? No. 4-2 is knitting, 4-3 is crochet, 4-6 is quilting. And I want to say embroidery is in between crochet and quilting, but I can't remember the exact call number. If it's an extra, add another decimal point to the quilting section, or if it's its own number. And I think that also varies a little bit between catalogers. So while you get your big numbers, they're usually pretty steady. The little decimal points can change library to library based on book and what they think the book should be cataloged as, because you do, as a librarian, you get to make those sort of choices and confuse people who travel to various libraries and they're used to going specifically to one exact call number to find the book they left at home and really wanted to make sure they had the right pattern. But oh well. Yeah, so I'm drinking coffee. A lovely potter from Fredericksburg, Anna made this for me, or not specifically for me, but she made this and I bought it at a festival, but she also taught me to spin. So she's a lovely, lovely human being, and yeah, so that is, I have coffee. I need coffee this morning. So yeah, that was the show name. I'm a little bit rambly this morning. The coffee, that was the first sip, so I need to have a little more of my system to sound a little more coherent. But let's go ahead, and I guess since I was talking about spinning, I do spin. I was taught by a lovely lady in Fredericksburg named Anna, who also does pottery and weaving and just amazing, beautiful things. I will add her, if she has a website, or at least her business name in the show notes, because I forgot to look it up before recording. So, but she taught me to spin. I have a very, very old Ashford traditional wheel from, I think I looked and tried to date it, from the early 70s. I guess that's not really old. It could be a 200-year-old wheel, but it's older than I am. And the wheel is a little special. It is definitely quirky, so when learning to spin, it was a little bit difficult to just, like, it doesn't treadle smoothly at all. So I have to get in its rhythm instead of it doing my rhythm. But once the wheel and I start talking, it gets really easy. The bobbin does sometimes fall off while spinning. But the wheel was a gift from a lovely friend, and so I'm totally into it, and I kind of like that I have the quirky, weird wheel that doesn't always cooperate. But so right now for spinning this month, I've been working on so the Tiny Paper Foxes podcast, I think that's Jenny with her co-hosts, Colin the cat and her husband Devin. Jenny has come up with a wonderful, wonderful sort of make-along, I guess, project for February, which is the Craft for 20 make-along. And I have been using my 20 minutes every day to spin, because since I've gotten my wheel, I've been pretty good about at least once a week sitting down and spinning, unless things get too stressful. And then I moved. And when I moved, the wheel came at one point, because it doesn't fold up, it's not travel friendly at all, so it had to go special in the back seat of the car at a special trip, and all of the different spinning stuff and all my fiber came in different loads of just everything. I moved from only an hour away, and I was living with my mom before, so things came down in stages, and it took me a little while to find all the pieces to, like, get my wheel set up again, because it is in lots of old pieces, and the bobbins were different bags and boxes, and the fiber was in different bags and boxes. So I did go and get everything put together for the start of February, and I think I have all of everything I need. I think I'm missing a bobbin. Couldn't tell you where it is. Might not be worth trying to find it. Might be worth just ordering some more. But anyways, I have been working on spinning, and so this is the yarn that I have been spinning. I have 2 skeins. I think we are right at 200 yards so far, but I have 2 full bobbins ready to ply sitting on the wheel. I didn't bring those in. So those will be plied this afternoon, probably tomorrow, so that I will have even more yarn that I'm spinning, which is great. I've never spun this quantity of the same fiber. This is sort of my first big fiber experiment. It's usually been small little things that can then barely make like a 50-gram skein. So that does make it a little difficult to have finished objects. This I bought ton of, it filled one of those gigantic department store shopping bags, like, and was really heavy. And, you know, fiber you don't think of as heavy. So I was trying to go for a sweater's quantity, and if I can spin enough of this consistently enough to be a sweater with probably some funky stitches, because it's definitely thick and thin, then I'm hoping to get a sweater out of this. It would be really nice to do that. It's definitely a lot. I mean, 200 yards, about a DK weight. That's enough for over a hat. Definitely a pair of mittens. So, and this is, I may be only a quarter of the way into the giant pile of fluff that I have waiting for me. So it'll be very exciting when it's all finished, but I am very thankful for the Tiny Paper Foxes make along, so that I am able to do this and like force myself to do this. It's been extremely meditative. Spinning is a really meditative thing, because you just get in the rhythm with the wheel and you just sit there and you go. And I've never only done 20 minutes. It's usually like an hour, unless I'm leaving for work in 20 minutes, and then I sit down and do it real quick before work. But yeah, so I don't know. Once I finish spinning, I'll figure out a pattern and knit something. I want to sort of go straight from spinning to knitting, not let it sit for ages and ages in my stash. Oh, one really cool thing about this is I have figured out how to spin woolen. I get those confused all the time. Doing the long draw spinning, which is pretty awesome. So the fiber I have is actually comb top, which is not really for spinning woolen, but I've been sort of balling it up and turning it into clouds, which maybe would make people freak out that I'm like intentionally like fluffing and tangling the yarn, but I have been sort of turning it into nice little clouds and then spinning from these little mini clouds, and it's kind of working out really, really well. It was magical all of a sudden when it started working, because you know, when you spin worsted, it's really easy, because you just like, you draft out a little bit and it spins, and then you draft out another little bit and it spins, and it's really, it's still difficult to like get your hands to make a consistently sized yarn, but it makes sense. There's no risk involved, you know. You just pull a little bit out, let the twist go in, and then pull a little bit more out, let the twist go in. You're always sort of in control of how much twist is where. With the long draw, you're sort of just saying, here's my fiber, I'm putting a ton of twist in it and hoping it turns into something consistent. And I still haven't figured out exactly how I've made it as consistent as I have. It's not that consistent, but you know, like how it's working, there's still some sort of magic going on that I haven't quite gotten the physics to make sense yet. But I'll let you know once the physics sort of clicks, and it's not just my hands are doing it, but my head's doing it too. Because that it's great that we can share our resources and our thoughts and how things are working out for us, because it helps the community. And I will certainly share once it starts making sense. The one thing I've noticed is it does have to be a big cloud of fiber. I can't just like spin it from the combed top. It won't, it just flies right out of my hand and onto the bobbin, and then I have to start again. But once it's the cloud, I also find I have to treadle faster than I would for worsted spinning. So I have to be at a pretty quick pace with my feet. Not that I'm adding more twist to the yarn, it's just I have to move faster in general. So I have to treadle faster, move my hand back faster, move it forward faster. The whole thing has to go at a slightly quicker pace than I traditionally used to spinning. So it's kind of awesome though, and thank you, Jenny, for the fabulous idea for the fabulous make-along. And I hope everybody else is doing really well. I've been following the hashtag on Instagram and checking in on the boards, on Jenny's Ravelry board. And everybody's work is beautiful. Everybody's work is absolutely beautiful, and I love it. And keep on doing awesome things. So, all right. So that's spinning. Go ahead. I'll move these to the ground over here. Okay, let's talk a little bit about knitting. More coffee, so this makes sense. So I said I would not cast on anything new until I finished some of my works in progress. Well, I can tell you right now I lied. That was the goal. I actually didn't cast anything on until last week. So I went 3 weeks without casting anything on, which is a really long time for me because I kind of have cast on itis like as a permanent condition. But one thing was a gift that really needed to be, it needs to be stuck in the mail. It's still not in the mail yet, but I finished it 2 days ago. So I've been making simple house slippers for everybody. I did that for the holidays. Well, I made my grandmother a pair. So they're just, this is some sort of Patton's yarn. And this, if it'll pick up the colors, is some Malabrigo. I had a little bit left over. I'm mostly just continuing to make simple house slippers as a way to use up all my worsted scraps because I don't knit much in worsted. And if I do, I just want to go out, buy the exact yarn I want, and then finish it. Like worsted is the one thing I don't really stash, except I have all these partial skeins because, you know, if you make a hat, you usually have about half of, you buy 100 grams. Hat only really takes like 60 grams, at least my hats. So I have all these bits and bobs of worsted weight yarn, so that's what I'm making the simple house slippers out of. So I have these for my grandma. They need to be put in the mail to North Carolina pretty darn quickly because we didn't get to see her for the holidays, which was really sad. So I need to get these to her, and I have a bunch of other cool stuff like some tea and some little lovely package for her. And I know she's working, it's tax season in the US, and if there are any other librarians watching this, they're probably also having like horror flashbacks of tax season. Well, we're in it, so memories from last week of the angry customers. And she works actually as an accountant, so she's having an even more stressful time during tax season than I am, so she definitely needs some nice hot chocolate and maybe a good book. But yeah, it's a rough period for those of us who have anything to do with the acquisition of tax forms and or filing your taxes, which the libraries actually in most jurisdictions play a pretty big role in. The one sort of place you can go and pick up some, not all, some tax forms is your local library, at least here in Virginia. The Virginia tax forms don't get sent here, but we get the federal tax forms, and so people can come up and pick out a paper form if they want one. But people are angry because the IRS now only sends us 1040s, which is like the, I don't know anything about which form is which, but they're just like the big sort of standard one, and there's a variety of them, but you just come and get a big standard one. And people get very angry when we don't have the rest. So, sorry, we have no control over that, but we tend to be the go-between and tend to get a lot of the fussy anger directed at us as library staff. So, be nice to your librarian until about April 20th, because we're nice people. We want to help you. Okay, so that was one finished object. That's the only thing I've finished in a month. And I started them and finished them within this month. So, yeah, let's see, what else? What else was I working on? Oh, I have been working a lot on my in paper mitts. So I've finished one. And I did it a little differently from the pattern. So as you can see, it doesn't go out in the thumb, the patterning doesn't. What I did was, I'm gonna have it on this one, I created a steek, and then I have, on this one, I cut the steek, picked up stitches, did some sort of funky short row something for the thumb. I don't know what I did, I'll make it up again when I do the second one. And then I finished the steek in a really interesting way. I did the finishing technique where you cut the steek, you don't do anything before you cut it. Then you pick up your stitches, you do all that, and then you unweave it, and then you weave in each end individually. Because I didn't want the bulk of a steek right here, but I did want the extra fluff and warmth from all the ends. So I wove in all my ends, most of them, and all the ones that mattered that would unravel the knitting, and I think it worked out pretty well. I think I made my life way more difficult than just following the pattern, but for some reason I got really panicked about increasing while doing the color work. And I don't know why I freaked out about that, but I had this like little mini, like, oh God, I can't do this. Oh well. But anyways, so instead of just increasing, I decided to do a steek instead, something that's actually considered a much harder technique, because yeah. But so I'm about, let's see, nearly done with the second one. I have maybe one more repeat before stopping the steeking process and just doing this little bit here, and then finishing it. I could probably do this in a night. I just keep getting distracted by everything else. But these are my end paper mitts. I really like the wooliness of the Knit Picks palette. I know it's not the fanciest, finest yarn, but it is really good for color work because it has that grip. You know, I had to, when I was doing the short rows on this, I actually had to take it out 3 times, and even though the steek was only 3 stitches on each side of where I cut it, it held together. Like, I really had to unwind the steek when I went to weave in all the ends, which was pretty fabulous that it held together that well. You know, wool is a miracle fiber, and woolly wool is even better, as opposed to the shiny super wash, which has its place, but you know, when you're doing color work and steeks, definitely find something with a lot of fluff and a lot of like catch to it, because it works wonders and like magic. Like, even just a little bit of how we work with it felts it just enough to hold it in place, which is just sort of amazing to me. Okay, so those were the end paper mitts. My sock yarn blanket, I've actually gotten a lot of work done on it, but it's in timeout right now, and I didn't even bring it in here because what I've done is, instead of working on the projects that, you know, I'd like to wear this winter while it's still cold, I just sat there working on the blanket and ignored these end paper mitts and ignored my sweater. So it's sitting in timeout. I'm also pretty much almost, I'm not out of mini skeins, but I've put a square in from like 80% of all the mini skeins I had. So while I still have yarn left in the blanket pile, it's stuff that already has a square in the blanket. So I need to knit some things to add to the blanket. And so it needs to sit in timeout for a little while until I can deal with that. I might swap something or do some swaps online if I find one that seems happy and calm and lovely, filled with lovely people. I might do that in the next couple of months to sort of refresh the stash and sort of take these ends that are now in my blanket and share them with somebody else, because most of them still have hexie puffs that I've already knit too. So it'll all be, we can share the love. I think the lovely Eric from the Sticks Plus Twine podcast, what is it? Hashtag share the cozy. He said that in his podcast last night, or I watched it last night. I'm not sure when he posted it, but share the cozy is a very lovely hashtag, and I definitely will adopt it. Good job, Eric, thank you. Wonderful branding. Fabulous. Okay, so that's in timeout. It actually has tripled in size since I sewed it last, but it's in timeout, so it doesn't get to come and have fun on the podcast. So let me grab the cardigan. I did work on this. This is actually ridiculously good knitting for when all my friends just sort of gather in my living room and we sit and talk, which has happened the past couple of weeks, which has been really lovely. They're all out of town this weekend, but they've all just sort of, I like how my house is now, let's just hang out in the living room house, which is exciting. So I have been working on my cardigan. It probably doesn't look too much different because there's not that much. So I think last time I showed you all, I was here right at the end of the blue, and now I only have like a row left in this pink before I do a break row and start on the green here again. So I did make some progress. There are over 400 stitches in a round, so it takes a while. Fortunately, the color work pattern is pretty easy and I don't really think about it, and I don't need to look at the book anymore. I can just sort of read what's going on and know which stitch to go next, which is another really great feeling. But it does, you know, it's definitely, you gotta have something else going on because the rows are, well, they started out this long. They're still really long. But I guess that's what I get for doing 9.5 stitches per inch on a sweater. I think that's, a lot of vintage sweaters are like that though, like actual vintage Shetland sweaters, so I'm just connecting with my roots. And ladies that had a lot more patience than I do, but it's working. There's still progress. As long as there's a little bit of progress, I'm okay. You know, as long as it doesn't sit and stagnate for months and get dusty. So I have been pulling it out and working on it. It is done with a combination of the gray is Cascade 220 fingering, as are the blue and the green and the brown. And then this is Knit Picks palette because I wanted to add an extra color in there. Also to extend it because I wasn't quite sure that with the gauge changes and all that, how much yarn I would need, and I was getting a little close. So I thought I would use some palette in there too. Palette is a little bit heavier, but I think once it's blocked, it won't make much of a difference. I think on palette size 2 US 2 needles, I get 8.5 stitches per inch, whereas the Cascade 220, that's where I'm getting the 9.5. So there is a bit of a difference there. So, but it's good. It's going. I'll keep working on it. This is not good coffee. It's Starbucks coffee, but Starbucks coffee is what they have at the grocery store. That's on my way home. Because I walk or bike everywhere, and I don't go out of my way unless it's a special trip. Like over the weekend I went on a big special trip to the farmer's market and to Target and all that. But usually if I need groceries, I stop at the one on the way home and just get what they have, which makes me a little sad I can't go to the fancy grocery stores, but I can still eat. Still tastes okay. It's coffee. There's caffeine. It's great. Okay, so I have one more work in progress to show. This one was cast on the other night because I just couldn't stand it anymore. I was trying to make myself finish the end paper mitts before I cast it on, but then I was just like, no. I did it anyways. I can't listen to myself at all. But, so, I am working on, there's a yarn mess. Okay. I'm working on a pair of socks. I don't do much sock knitting. Is that gonna focus? I don't know. I don't do much sock knitting. I want to have more hand knit socks. I have one pair of hand knit socks. They are the Kate Davies Colorwork First Footing socks. There's also a Gaelic name that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. I think Calia something or other, and it's fabulous. They're beautiful socks. They're on my feet right now and they're really dirty, so I'm not gonna like stick my foot up here to show them because that would not be very polite. But they're very, very warm, fabulous socks, and I love them. And I want more hand knit socks because I tend to wear these as well, sometimes out, but then sometimes when I get home I just put them back on because whatever commercially knit socks I was having on during the day hurting my feet or just making me sad, you know, like you want something comfortable after being on your feet all day. So I want more hand knit socks, so I cast these on. This is Koigu, and I'm using that for contrasting heels and cuffs. And this is some lovely yarn that, is it coming in? I hope so. I can't tell. I don't know how to use my phone as a camera yet. We'll get there. I'll learn. This came from a lovely, lovely person named Sarah in New Zealand. I think her and I did a little swap about 3.5 years ago, and this has been sitting in my stash ever since, and it is 85% recycled possum merino blends. Possum. Super cool. And then 15% nylon. So I figured it'd be good sock. It's pretty, it does not feel soft at all. To me, that sounds appealing. It feels very tough, very strong, very good for socks. I'm knitting it incredibly densely, denser than I usually knit, and I don't know if this is just how socks are supposed to be knit, because the ones I've done have been sporadic for gauge, because I've only do like one pair a year, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'll do a sock, and I try it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this is just to show how many rows, because it's so, the stitches are so small. I can't count them because it's much denser than I usually, even though I think I have different, like less stitches per inch on this than I do on my sweater. My sweater is still pretty airy, and this is definitely very dense, so counting all the little stitches is a little bit of a pain, especially there's absolutely no variegation, so they all look alike, and I keep losing my spots. So this is 40 rows in the blue. But I'm going to, I downloaded the Fish Lips Kiss heel pattern, which I'll try it. I think all the socks I've traditionally ever done, regardless of whether I've used a pattern or not, have just had that slip stitch heel, which is great. I like the slip stitch heel, and I like doing a gusset because it makes that first couple of inches of the foot go by really fast. Because, you know, every other row you're actively engaged with the knitting as opposed to just knit, 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 keep watching podcasts and TV. But I'll try the Fish Lips Kiss heel. I think might fit better. I do always have a weird little like bloop at the end of my heels. And yeah, I also don't know, since it's been so long since I've knitted a sock out of sock weight yarn, how many stitches to do. So I just did 64, and I'm using size US 1. I don't know the millimeters, but size US 1. They are, so I think it'll fit. They feel like they'll fit. They look big enough. If I get it on my foot and they're too small, they will go to my one grandmom who has very small feet. If they're too large, they will go to my other grandmom who has very large feet. So somebody always gets a pair of socks, which is nice. I'm glad we all have different size feet. But yeah, so maybe about, I don't know, I think I'll make it like this far before I put the heel in. Another 20 rows, 30, I don't know. But those are my really naughty, I shouldn't have cast these on socks, so they can sit there. I will probably finish them before I finish anything else, because I do that. Well, this sock, and then the next sock will wait like a year. I get really excited about something. I want to knit it. get most of the way done, and then that last finishing step, I'm like, well, if I do this, it'll be over. And then I can't bring myself to finish it. It's a little ridiculous. But I need to finish it. And that actually is a really good transition into the lovely dress behind me. So this is 90% done. And today, as soon as I finish this podcast and get the electronics going and making it upload itself to YouTube, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to hem it, because it is nearly done. It fits pretty well. There's some funky, I think everything I do, I need to do a full bust adjustment, because I fit the shape of a full bust adjustment, but I've never done it because usually I'm like, whatever, it'll be fine. No, I need to do one. So the dress is here. Let me see if I can get it moved forward. Oh, that's probably making a terrible noise. It's on my steamer irony thing. I have a proper iron. You can't sew without a proper iron, but this is what I use like before work every day, because most of what I have is nice cotton and wool. So the fabric is I found the selvage and then I lost it again. Peaceful Harmonies or something like that. It was a Thanksgiving line, maybe back in 2011. Got it on the clearance table, got like 7 yards for like $2 a yard. It was fabulous. I had one of the quilt stores I worked at. The pockets are hand-dyed linen. I had a boss actually who was really into dyeing things, and whenever she would dye things, it was never worth just her doing stuff on her own. So she would always invite us to bring our own fabric, and it's a lot of work to set out the stuff and just do one piece of fabric. So if we had 8 of us set out the stuff, and she sort of was like, bring your own fabric and help me clean up, and I won't charge you for the dye, which was absolutely lovely of her. And so we had a couple of dyeing parties, and the pockets were one of my little fat quarters I had. Everything, so the sleeves, I maybe should have taken this off, but I don't want to take it off now. The sleeves are just faced with bias tape, and they're stitched down with the sewing machine. I'm going to do the same practice for the hem, which is not my favorite. Machine stitch hems I think look terrible, mostly because a lot of my garments that I buy and wear and make are vintage or based on vintage patterns, and I think in like the 1940s the thought of machine stitching a hem would have just been like, I don't know, they would have thrown you out of the dress shop, you know, like it wasn't a thing then. You hand stitch your hems, and that's what I do. Except for everything else here that I usually would have hand stitched has been machine stitched, because I'm just following the pattern. And so I think I'll do the bottom too. Also, that means I'll finish it today, and it won't languish in the giant pile that you can't see. Right over in this window here is a pile of all the things that need hand stitched hems. There are like 4 garments over there. So we're not going to do that with this one. It is going to be a finished object soon. Maybe I'll be wearing it next time, but yeah, so, and it fits. I was thinking about putting some smocking in the back, but the ties really do hold the back in a nice drape. I was a little worried about it, so I think it'll be fine. When I make this dress next time, I will not be just following the pattern blindly. I will be moving some things around. This is supposed to be a wearable muslin, not necessarily the finished dress, though it is, I mean, it's wearable. I don't like spending a lot of time on something and having it not be wearable unless I really don't know what I'm doing. Or really feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing and I do it anyways. But I also will be changing the armhole facing to do, I mean, I think a lot of the vintage patterns I've made dresses out of, they tell you how to finish the armhole facing in a much better way than this does, but it uses sort of the same idea behind it. So using bias facing to just do a little fold over sleeve cuff thing. That's exactly what this is. That's what some of the vintage dresses are, but they have you do it in a much more finished, professional looking way. This is definitely looking a little more homemade, not handmade. But we're okay. It's gonna be cute. I'm gonna wear it all spring, all summer, and probably with thermal underwear in the fall, because I love cotton dresses. So that should be finished this afternoon. If I don't finish it this afternoon, I will be very sad with myself, but that is the goal. The next thing I have, okay, is right here. So I've had this is another work in progress, the Jasmine top by Colette Patterns. It's a bias cut top made to be used with something lightweight, lawn or silk or something lovely. And I have some lawn that I got at a flea market in Asheville that was essentially just a bunch of like this piles of fabric, and this one was for $5 and it was a lot of fabric. I still have a lot left over. Can you tell I like finding things in piles of junk or clearance racks or all that, just because fabric is almost prohibitively priced for somebody who doesn't have a lot of budget. So, or at least nice fabric. You can always find cheap quilting cotton, but nice fabric is hard to find, and this is really nice fabric, and that's usually, I'm a little bit of a fabric and yarn snob. So here's the print. I hope that focused. I had to cover up my face and I couldn't see. I was hand stitching this entire garment because for a while there my sewing machine was not working and I wanted to start it. And actually I was gonna just maybe transfer it over to the machine to do the rest of it, but I might just hand stitch it. Good couch TV watching time. The hand stitching actually holds up as well as machine stitching, and it creates a finer seam. So on fancier garments, a hand stitch seam is a little bit nicer because they're not as heavy. So I like them more. That's why I like a lot of the sort of sewing stuff I look at is either historically based, or I like a lot of the smocking and the stuff that usually you see on little baby girl dresses. And I just use them on full adult garments with a little bit more of a nicer, not just like giant poofy princess dresses, but you know, like a regular, like this. And I do like smocking, and I do know how to smock, and it's fun. And I think used in the right way, it doesn't look old or kitsch. You know, it can add an interesting little whatever to your garment. But so this is the next thing I'm going to finish sewing wise. So once I finish that, we can move on to another one of the giant pile that's hiding in the corner that you can't quite see of the general works in progress that I have for sewing. So that's it for sewing. What else do I have to talk about? Okay, so one more thing I wanted to mention that I'm sort of participating in / also stealing and augmenting, I don't know. So the Inside Number 23 podcast is absolutely lovely. It's done by Katie, and she's in Britain, and she's wonderful and has a great sense of style, vintage style that I wish I could put the effort into. I've never been able to do that much. Lovely makeup and hair. My hair is usually just still sort of tucked away somehow that I can make it look kind of work for the vintage aesthetic. But she has an absolutely wonderful podcast and is an absolute genius for coming up with the 50 points for Gryffindor scheme that she's doing. If you haven't been watching her podcast, I would highly suggest it. And check out her 50 points for Gryffindor. She has like a separate video for it. So if you're just interested in that, though, I'd suggest watching it all. She has this wonderful point scheme, and basically the more finished objects you do, they're assigned different numbers of points, and then you can use those points to justify spending money on yarn or fabric, which is absolutely genius because we all need something to sort of add some mindfulness. At least I need something to add mindfulness to my spending. And there is, at the end of April, the Powhatan Fiber Festival here in Virginia. I know a lot of people go to Maryland Sheep and Wool. That's too big for me. I just want to try out the Powhatan Festival because it's nice and small. Or not nice and small, but it's smaller than Maryland Sheep and Wool. It's not like a 4-day convention. It's like a afternoon. So I would like to be able to have some spending money for that I can sort of at least allocate. And I did sort of redo my own rubric, and since I've redone my own rubric, I'm calling it 50 points for Ravenclaw, as I am a Ravenclaw, not a Gryffindor. So I don't know if we need to have maybe a little house competition going on, see which house is going to get the most points at the end of, who knows, end of time. But that would be kind of fun. I don't know. Anyways, so my 50 points for Ravenclaw, basically what I've done that's different is I've assigned different point values for the same object knit out of different weight yarns, because I can knit a pair of slippers or mitts in worsted weight yarn that takes me, I don't know, an afternoon, and that shouldn't be worth the same amount of points as a fingering weight pair of socks, which is going to take me about a week, you know, if I work on it monogamously and don't cast anything new on, which I might do, and then never finish anything ever again. But so I've sort of adjusted my point scale to take into account the weight of the yarn and approximately how many stitches are going into the object. So I think like my Ursula sweater, I went ahead and just had that be 6 points because, or any fingering weight yarn sweater. And the points don't get assigned till it's completely finished, interweaved in, all that. And I've also added you get to add a point if I started it pre-2016. And I get to add a point if it's a gift for somebody. And I get to add one more point for when it goes in the mail if it's a gift for somebody, because I have this terrible habit of hoarding gifts until I see somebody next. You know, I have a birthday gift from last April that still hasn't gotten in the mail, and that's really devastating to me. But it's really hard sometimes to make myself go to the post box or post office. But so I get another little point for that. And in terms of how much the points are worth, I think mine are different than hers. Maybe, I can't quite remember, and I probably should have checked before recording, but I didn't. So every point is worth 10 grams of yarn, is how I'm thinking of it. So it's not just like one skein or 1 yard, it's 10 grams of yarn. So that way I don't sort of round up or round down. If I can't afford a whole skein of yarn, then I can't buy it. You know, if I only have four points, I can't just throw that 50 gram skein of yarn in. And this will never go into negative numbers. I can't buy on credit. I can see myself trying to do that, and like I'll just never break even again. So yeah. So I think we're getting close to an hour, which is really long. I didn't think it would take this long, but oh well. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you everyone who watched and subscribed to the first video, even though you were really sort of like subscribing for a maybe. But hopefully I will continue to do this and have things get a little more consistent. So yeah, thank you all. You are beautiful. I hope everybody has a fabulous week full of lots of warmth and happiness and lots of happy making, lots of good books and good company and hot beverages and lots of wool. So thank you, and I will see you in a couple of weeks.